Hello and welcome back to the Octave Leap channel, where I help you leap into your ideal reality by understanding your own blueprint using human design, astrology, the gene keys, as well as my own innovative system, Trifecta, and also helping you actually make the shift. So it's not just an intellectual exercise, but it's a lived experience. So in today's video though, we're gonna cover something I find absolutely fascinating about human design and gene keys and how they came to be, because this is a story and a half. And this story also helped me find a missing link in my quest, a missing link that I've been looking for a very long time. Now I must say, as far as origin stories go for esoteric systems, the human design legacy started off as one crazy trip. Even if you don't plan on doing readings, you gotta hear this story. It is wild. And not only that, but there's a very ominous prophecy for the years to come. Let's dive in. So, after listening to and absorbing about 20 hours of workshops, courses, and Jovian Archives content straight from the founder's mouth, I gained a totally new perspective on where human design came from, how it evolved over time, and how one man who had no interest in anything esoteric was all of a sudden the one responsible for alchemizing quantum physics with astrology, the I Ching, Kabbalah, the Vedic chakra system, and even genetic biology. This blew my mind. The crazy part was, this guy was echoing what ancient Gnostics had already said for millennia. Not only that, and this is where things get really creepy, but he discovered a fundamental subatomic particle 10 years before physics did. Do you want to know what the subatomic particle tells us? It proves that we're indeed swimming in an ocean of consciousness, and the physical mechanism for how astrology actually works was finally now revealed. And this subatomic particle, it's called the neutrino. And its story puts human design and all the future experiments that came from this human design origin into a grand historical arc, an arc that is converging on an important event. And we approach it, we're very close right now in 2024. So by knowing the backstory, you'll gain an appreciation for the system and also the mechanics of reality, which it can be very helpful for anybody navigating through this multidimensional creation, and a little cautionary tale of what might be to come. This expose will put a lot of things into context that you wouldn't get just from watching a normal human design tutorial video on YouTube. Now, a lot of people that approach human design, they talk about human design from a business perspective, a marketing perspective, how to do your life better, but they don't talk about the origin story. And this origin story really sets the foundation for understanding where all this comes from. So by understanding it, you'll know how to place your actions into the greater evolutionary arc. And you'll also learn why everything about human design is about to change right now, very soon in 2024. I promise I won't keep the best part from it. Human design was created by a fellow Canuck, or Canadian for my international friends. His name was Alan Krakauer, and he was an advertising executive born into a privileged family in Quebec, Canada in the late 1940s. And soon you'll know why this matters and how his later life couldn't be further from his formative years. Alan grew up like anybody else and worked at a high level in the corporate world. He exhibited no sign of becoming the modern innovator of an esoteric movement. But in the early 80s, something shifted for him. He felt a call. So he sold everything and moved to the mystical island of Ibiza, Spain. Now in those days, he wasn't living the boho, rich hippie, spiritual lifestyle that we see of Ibiza on Instagram. No, this man was living in the wilderness with no money, and he basically roamed as some sort of contemporary hunter-gatherer. He would take all sorts of narcotics, partying recklessly sometimes, and essentially indulging in his feral side. I mean, we all should do this from time to time, especially if we need to loosen up a bit from the grip of the modern world. Now, Alan even took the liberty to rename himself from Alan to Ra, Now, I'm assuming this had something to do with the ancient Egyptian sun god, and perhaps living outdoors on a sunny island in the Mediterranean would give one a newfound appreciation for the sun. All was going great for Ra. Just fine living this nomadic lifestyle in the Ibiza wilderness until the day he heard the voice. "Go back home," the voice instructed, and so he did. As he approached the disheveled ruina that he was staying in, he saw that there was a light on inside the dwelling, a light that should not have been on. With his trusted sidekick, a dog named Barley, Ra approached the ruina trepidatiously. And that's where things got out of this world. For the next 8 days, Ra did not sleep. He did not eat nor drink, and Barley just lay motionless at his feet, never moving at all. The voice instructed Ra to write. Ra claimed that he was in excruciating pain. The only thing that relieved the pain was transcribing the intensity of information that was pouring through him, presumably from the voice. During this 8-day period, he transcribed hundreds of notes, complex information that he had no prior knowledge of, knowledge that apparently linked Kabbalah to the Indian chakra system, astrology to genetics, and the complex interplay of planetary cycles. Ra did not describe this voice as a benevolent being. He said it was a terrifying experience, and the voice sounded like a 150-year-old woman that had smoked a lot of cigars. By the end of the experience, Ra was shell-shocked. As the voice finally disappeared, Ra had a profound realization. Nothing like this will ever happen to me again. And that's when he wept uncontrollably. Perhaps he felt a deep sense of loss, knowing that his most rapturous, mystical experience would never happen again, and that it was now time for work. And he couldn't believe what he had to do. He had to go forth and convince the world that he held the keys to how every individual had been negatively conditioned not to live their life as they were designed, as their heart intended to. And all that information came from an invisible being, channeled from a mysterious voice. Ra admitted that he would never have believed anyone if they had claimed to heard information from a mysterious voice. He couldn't believe that this was going to be his story. Up until now, we could say that he was quite the skeptic, and these esoteric things had never interested him in the past. Nonetheless, Ra went forth, and he started by changing his name. Well, adding to it, actually. He became known as Ra Uruhu, the pioneer of the human design system. In the weeks and months that passed since his meeting with the voice, Ra second-guessed himself often. He wasn't sure of what to make of the words that he had transcribed, and now that he was in a more normal frame of reference, it was difficult for him to reconnect with the feeling, the revelations, and the inspiration that had happened during that 8-day period. Finally, one day he burned everything that had been transcribed during this encounter with the voice. He felt he wanted nothing to do with the madness that he had written. But as more time passed, he couldn't stop thinking about the human design system. What if this experience happened for a very intentional reason? And what if the world needs to know this, and I'm the one chosen to bring it forth? In 1992, he published his first book, The Human Design System, and began to speak about it. In 1994, he found his way to the company of German astrologers. He figured, they're astrologers, they believe strange things and know way too much about the transits of planets. They would be capable and interested to hear what I have to say. But it wasn't long after that he realized it wasn't just astrologers that were interested in what he had to say. Everyone was. From business to the householder to astrologers to anybody seeking to live a different way than the homogenized mass consciousness of society. In fact, Ra was quite surprised by just how fast this strange body of work was growing. The world was ready for what the human design system had to offer. As the 90s passed, Ra continued growing human design internationally. Despite how much it grew, he never succumbed to the limelight. At least, he didn't dress that way. Even though he was completely booked out and hosting retreat after retreat, He dressed like your typical billionaire. Awkwardly fitting clothes, the kind that get tucked away in the thrift shop with the relatable baseball cap. Mind you, these clothes that he wore always artfully portrayed these strange references to human design through witty slogans that only the insiders would get. Now in 2003, something interesting happened in the story. There was a fork off of the human design system. One of his close students, Richard Rudd, decided that the cryptic, precise, and stalwart approach taken by the human design system was not the only way that this body of work could be used. You see, human design was quite mechanical. It was like an in-depth science with layers upon layers upon layers. However, it could also be too precise, you could say. And Richard Rudd kind of felt that there was something really, really amazing about this, but he had a different way to express it. He felt that these indeed were esoteric keys to our genetics. But Richard believed that this same integral system could also be expressed as proses of mystical poetry. He realized that our design was mutable based on the frequency in which we were living our lives at, the frequency defined by the attitude of our heart. The shadow frequency meant that we were slaves to our genetics and controlled by external forces. The gift frequency was where our heart beamed brightly, standing in our individuated glory. And the Siddhic frequency was where a genetic trait slowly merged back into unity with the absolute, revealing the perfection that underlies all life. Yes, the gene keys caused quite the stir, galvanizing the once united human design movement. Yet, things kept picking up in the human design world. In 2011, though, we had an unfortunate incident as Ra Uru Hu died. Some say it was a stroke, others a heart attack. Either way, he was dearly missed by all his close followers. And, well, maybe fortunately, he passed at the peak of his reputation. And unlike other wise masters, he didn't have to suffer any scandals or risk fading away into obscurity. But before Ra passed, he did have some words to say about the future, about a time that was coming, that was not far off. And in 2024, it's just around the corner. Are you ready to hear Ra Uru Hu's prophecy? Before you create your next body graph, you might want to listen to this. Once you hear this prophecy, you'll either decide that you're all in, or you immediately click on a much safer route and go with like a Mind Valley ad about manifestation and eradicate the phrase human design from your vocabulary. All right, you ready to hear this mind-bending tale? So apparently, the old school, seven-centered, seven-chakra being that we hear about in all the textbooks and from all the yogis of old went out of circulation starting in the year 1781, coincident with the discovery of the planet Uranus. We became a new species, and this is evidenced by the extension in life expectancy. We went from a Saturnian body, which has a life cycle approximately that of Saturn's orbit around the sun, which is about 29 years, into a Uranian body, which has a life cycle of 84 years, which is coincident also with the orbit of Uranus around the sun. So in essence, we became a new species. Well, not quite. We became an interim species that would not be fully complete until the year 2027. The Homo sapien would be no more, and in 2027, we would become a new species called the raves. This is an evolutionary arc, so please understand that 2027 is more of a marker in time for something that would be occurring slowly over decades. The raves are a nine-centered being that live a very different life than we're accustomed to. They do not need an external authority to commune with the beyond. The Homo sapiens of old, you see, according to Ra, needed external authorities like priests, clerics, kings, shamans, and so forth to commune with the greater forces of nature. They worked as tribes and were perceptive as their way of operating required that they were in tune with external cues. So you can see here, if we're relying on ancient knowledge from these older systems, we're relying on a different species to tell us how to live today. And this species relied on external authority, whereas we live in a body that has internal authority. So we have a different guidance system, a more evolved and more advanced guidance system. And the raves are just like this, except the raves have some interesting features about them. The raves don't eat meat, they aren't very emotional, and they're not very social. They listen to themselves, but have little regard for the Homo sapiens. At first, as the raves come into form, they will need Homo sapiens to help supply rave children. Ra said that birth rates would continue to decline and that Homo sapiens would actually be more fertile than the raves, so there was some cooperation needed between these two species, or the evolved form of the human species. At a certain point, though, the raves would simply split off from the Homo sapiens society and live in societies on their own. This sounds an awful lot like the idea of a bifurcation or a split in society that is taking place today. And for a story that was told back in the late 80s, it all does sound eerily familiar and like this prophecy is kinda in some way maybe coming true. Not only that though, but the raves are already here. In fact, I'm living in a rave body. You're living in a rave body too. Between 1781 and 2027, a grand biological mutation into this rave body has already taken place. We are no longer Homo sapien, and very few raves are actually here. We're something else entirely. We are the Homo intransitus, and we were born into a rave body with inner authority. Just look at the kids of today. They're nonconformists, highly gifted, some autistic, neurodivergent, and deeply individualistic. Veganism is on the rise, traditional values are on the decline, and rave culture is basically here to stay on this evolutionary arc. And this is a great awakening, just not the one that you thought and I thought was going to happen. This isn't a spiritually enlightened new age. This is a rebirth of the human species. And guess what? Labor hasn't even begun. Life isn't easy for the next few hundred years. Birth rates decline. More species go into extinction. Birds completely disappear. The tribally minded Homo sapiens would gasp their loudest breath before fading into the future. Could this civilization decline that we're seeing around us today be related in any way to what Ra was saying? In any case, Ra Uru Hu was pretty clear on what he thought we should do. We already live in a rave body, even if we're not fully raves, and this body is a nine-centered body, and we have all the benefits of inner authority waiting to be explored by us. However, most never realize their inner authority. This is due to the mental conditioning that we have inherited from our Homo sapien ancestors, society, and other negative influences that might benefit by having large groups of people running around looking for an external authority. And Ra, too, this is the shocking part, he actually admitted the end of human design. Yes, children born after the year 2027 will be fully rave and they will render the human design body graph obsolete. So, what do we follow next? Well, perhaps if we all learn to operate from our inner authority, we could not even need a system. We could avoid this grim fate that's stated earlier, or at least shorten the duration of the coming dark age so that the decline does not last any longer than it needs to. Well, that doesn't sound very empowering now, does it? Fortunately, there may be another way. So if you've seen my other videos, you'll know about something called cosmic human design, or maybe you've heard me talk about Trifecta, which are based on something called the true sidereal system. Now, the true sidereal system is extremely important, but it's also very new. And by being very new, there's not really a lot of information about it, and it's still in its experimentation phase collectively. Even for those of us that have used it plenty, it's still something that we're learning from. I discovered this true sidereal system last year and realized that it allowed one to play the game at a higher level that might not have to deal with so many of the low-level consequences that existed in Ra's prophecy. You see, the fundamental issue of the tropical zodiac is based on something called the wobble of the Earth. We need to understand how this wobble of the Earth influences the tropical zodiac for one important reason, because it may point to the Earth's own conditioning. And we don't want to be sucked into that. So the wobble of the Earth is basically a very slow rotation of the poles on the Earth's axis over a 26,000 year period. Astrologers have long known about this wobble and how it governs the ages. So the age of Aries, the age of Pisces, the age of Taurus. If you look back through history, you'll see that collective consciousness was very much tied to the themes of these ages. 2000 to 4000 BC was the age of Taurus. That's where we really advanced with agriculture. There was fertility cults all across the Mediterranean and the Middle East, which was the epicenter of human civilization at that time. From the year 2000 BC to 0 BC was the age of Aries. That was the age of might is right, and just like walls of men pouring into each other by the hundred thousands. If you've seen the movie 300, you kind of get an idea. It was the time of the Ramses dynasty, where Egypt transitioned from being a very ceremonial spiritual culture into being a culture of war. But this dominating archetype didn't last forever. From the year 0 to the year 2000 was the age of Pisces, which was governed by religion. And this is really where the idea that we need an intermediary between us, the unclean, sinful people, and the divine, that's the control mechanism in the age of Pisces. Now, what does Aquarius have to deal with? Well, Aquarius has to deal with technology and science. But on the bright side, the flip side of the coin, Aquarius is also about divine intelligence, so that we can also realize at a higher frequency that we possess this technology inherently. So the archetype of Aquarius very much matches up with what Ross said about this coming age and the new human, the rave. Where we're at in this cycle is measured astrologically by the exact degree in a specific constellation that the sun rises on the spring equinox. The pattern reverses through the zodiac, and that's why they call it the precession of the equinox. So the sign that rises on the spring equinox seems to be a marker of what influences collective consciousness. Right now, in 2024, we're roughly at 6 degrees of Pisces. This changes by 1 degree every 72 years. So technically, the age of Aquarius does not fully begin until about the age 2400 AD, according to these calculations. Now, the tropical zodiac was created by a Greek astronomer named Ptolemy roughly 2200 years ago. At this time, the sun rising on the spring equinox was aligned with the physical start of the zodiac. However, Ptolemy, perhaps erroneously now, but not in his time, stated that the zodiac begins on the spring equinox, because at that time, where the sun was rising on the spring equinox lined up with 0 degrees of the star constellation Aries. Now, how he decided to calculate it was a little bit different. He stated that the seasons of the zodiac mirror the seasons of the year. Therefore, whatever location the sun rises on the spring equinox, we're going to call the next 30 degrees of sky space the sign of Aries. The next 30 degrees that follow that is Taurus. So you see, he's using a moving datum. Now, in his day, it was lined up perfectly with the start of Aries, coincidentally. But after 2200 years, you can see we've drifted 24 degrees. And this is why tropical astrology and astronomers do not get along at all. But for me, in the way that I look at this is more evidence for the link between the Earth's conditioning and what the tropical zodiac is actually measuring. Because now we're not looking at the stars in the sky, we're looking at the stars in the sky through this filter created by this Greek guy from 2200 years ago. And since that location has changed by over 24 degrees since Ptolemy's time, and we keep using the same system, a lot of people have bought into this. And as you may or may not know, when a lot of people buy into something, it makes it real. It creates a thought form. And if you look at the history of astrology, it was used by kings, it was used by bankers, it was used by the elite, it was used by societies, it was used by astrologers and everyday people. There's millions, if not billions over history of people that have used the tropical zodiac. So in a way, if it's linked to the Earth's wobble, which is the Earth's conditioning, and we've bought into it as a collective, it is a real thing, and it does create apparent order, but maybe not in the way that we think it does. So here's what we know, and I'm totally taking the perspective that this is all an experiment, and I'm not saying anything that I said before this is true. Some of it is fascinating, some of it is coincidental, and some of it there's evidence for. But this is what we do know. There's a wobble of the Earth that forms a 26,000-year cycle measured by where the sun rises on the spring equinox. This point changes by 1 degree every 72 years. Tropical astrology is based on the writings and rules of a Greek astronomer named Ptolemy, who lived 2,200 years ago. And Ptolemy claimed that by starting the zodiac on the spring equinox, that the zodiac mirrors the seasons of the year, again linking the tropical zodiac to the behavior patterns of planet Earth. Now, Ra-Uru-Hu, who received the information to create human design from the voice that we talked about earlier, believed that the voice was actually a bundle of what he called design crystals at the center of the Earth, potentially indicating that this voice was related to the Earth. So the updated hypothesis that true sidereal astrology, human design, and gene keys is predicated upon goes something like this. Now, this is my own words here. The tropical zodiac measures the stars and planets in the sky from the Earth's own conditioning. The 26,000-year wobble of the Earth is like the planetary level of the matrix. Therefore, if we want to accurately understand our role without the Earth's layer of conditioning, we need to use the planets and stars exactly as they appear in the sky. And in my studies, and my studies have taken me from Freemasonry to Gnosticism to all sorts of very unique esoteric science and even theoretical physics. So I'm really looking for accurate answers. I'm not looking for religion, and I keep an open-minded skepticism as I refine my model. But what I've found in my model is that there's multiple layers to reality, and that they each have a matrix, but the further down you go, there's more laws that kind of bind you into that matrix. So the Earth's level of conditioning has more laws than, let's say, the solar layer. Now, there's many layers higher than that, but we need to kind of go sequentially to get there. So if we're operating at the Earth's layer, there's less freedom that we have. Dr. John Lilly, who is one of my favorite psychotherapists, this guy's nationally acclaimed in the US. He discovered floating. He discovered many advances in biofeedback technology. He was really seen as a prominent psychotherapist until he started to kind of get very fringe and alternative, and he refused to cooperate with giving his findings over to the government and military for who knows what they were going to do. He thought that they were going to use them for mind control technology, so he said no. And that's where he sort of became ostracized. And he became more of an esotericist as time passed. Now, he describes the Earth matrix as something called ECHO, Earth Coincident Control Office. When you know it's there, you move on to operating at the next level, the SCCO, which is the Solar Coincident Control Office. So basically, you're playing the game at a higher level. And so for those who want to observe reality and their lives from the next higher order, and when you operate at a higher order, at least according to esoteric systems, you actually have more impact, you have more influence, and you have more freedom. So by operating at a higher order, you can basically change outcomes that seem impossible to change when you're working at a lower order of reality. So in order to do this, though, we can't be operating at the level of the tropical zodiac. And that's really where I see the true sidereal systems that, like astrology, human design, and gene keys come into play. And my own Trifecta system is based on that. However, because it's still an experiment, that this is a change to the original experiment that was tropical human design. And when you change one key variable like the zodiac, you need to make sure that the rest of the system still works. Well, thousands of people swear that this new system works extremely well, but it works differently. If you go on YouTube, you'll see many of the people talking that used to be or still are, popular human design analysts. They're saying, hey, like, this system's really cool. There's hundreds of these people, and there's a real growing interest in cosmic human design because they're seeing validity in it. We are running the experiment for ourselves, and if it resonates, well, use it. Because I found that this system works extremely well. I've completed over 520 core wound readings at the time of this video, 125 detailed reports for people, and dozens of one-on-one sessions just using the true sidereal zodiac. And in my readings, I have to say that the vast majority of people who report back say that this version of them, compared to their old chart, feels like who they really are or who they really want to be. Now, some people, I have had about 2 or 3 people in this amount that basically don't agree with me, and they feel their tropical chart is more representative. That's fine too, because this isn't a religion, this is an experiment. And with an experiment, we have to look and we have to refine our models scientifically. Now, I do have an open mind to things, so I'm open to new ideas. I'm open to working with energy in subtle realms, but I'm going to be discerning. And I'm also going to allow my perception to change. I think that's very healthy. I think when we don't allow our perception to change, we run the risk of forming cult-like behavior or basically getting left behind by the evolutionary arc. So I got to give a big shout out to Richard Mason, who he runs the Cosmic Human Design website and the Cosmic Human Design Facebook group, because this guy recalculated all the original human design gates for the respective placement in the true sidereal zodiac. This painstaking effort took the guy 2 years to do. He was really, really convinced on this after he had discovered the true sidereal zodiac through Athan Chimenti's work, which Athan Chimenti created masteringthezodiac.com, which is a great site as well. However, this work that Richard did was really worth it because it effectively kicked off the movement of Cosmic Human Design in 2021. And if you go back and look through the Facebook group or you look through some of the videos, you can see the guy's on fire and people are loving it. You know, look at some of the comments, you'll see that people are like, oh my God, this is who I am. So I believe, personally, from all what I've seen and observed, that this is the next phase of the human design experiment. However, there are still a number of concepts that are under investigation, such as, well, what body graph do I use? You know, the human design body graph worked. Now, we have a cosmic body graph. I got 2 bodies. How does that work? And how does this affect my variables? I was already living in my ideal location and eating a certain way, and now that's changed. So can I use both charts? And so in approaching this experiment as scientifically as I can currently say that there's some answers that I don't have enough data to give you a meaningful solution. I do have hypotheses, I do have like opinions, but I don't really want to share them because they're just opinions or hypotheses. I'd rather share them once they're validated by more data. So I have run several experiments, for instance, with the PHS system, environment and the digestion, that's the PHS. So when I run those variables, I ran them for a group of 10 people, and these people some of them were familiar with their old human design, but they all said that these really resonated. So I've done it with a very small data set, and I have seen good answers, but I need to do more research there in order to really be able to confidently say that, yes, this is better. The other thing is that it might not be better for everyone. There might be people out there who still resonate with their tropical human design, and I'm not saying that they're lower or worse or anything like that. It's just we got to find what works for us. And if we don't feel like the tropical human design system's giving us the answers, we should look into the cosmic human design version because there could be something very beneficial there. So based on where I'm at with the experiment, I can say that certain planets and their placements are extremely accurate using the true sidereal system through the gates and the lines of human design. And I also love the idea of frequency because it's extremely empowering for people. So when you run them through the gates and lines, the results I found are staggering. And that's why I created Trifecta. So this is pretty new. This is like the latest development in the last 9 months. And it all came in a crazy download that I had after meeting a friend who got me onto true sidereal astrology and cosmic human design. And the way that I lay this out is kind of like the gene keys have a hologenetic profile. There is a progression to these, and it makes sense because this progression allows you to first resolve, deep trauma and wounding, the wreckage in the way of seeing clearly, so that you can align to your highest path in life, and then start to amplify your attraction mechanism to create actual prosperity. So there's something to using it in this sequence, and I'll share the sequence with you now. So here it is. And in addition to the progression below, I also have to say that I use therapies. So I use esoteric processes, and I actually create frequency enhanced soundscapes that help you rebalance and resolve any imbalances in this progression. So the first stage, resolving the core wound, we have a collective wound which is given by the personality Chiron, and the frequency is 172.86 degrees. The next one in here is the deep subconscious emotions given by the design moon. And again, this frequency is based on a higher octave of its orbit around the sun. And this was calculated by a Swiss mathematician in the 70s called Hans Cousteau. So I'm drawing on his work and I'm using his calculations to get these because they've proven over time to be very accurate. And I've used these in many soundscapes with thousands of people over the last 5 years, so I can stand behind their effectiveness. The next one is where we place our energy unconsciously. Now, I've reworked some of this because there's some things in the Gene Keys hologenetic profile I really love, other things I don't agree with. I don't agree with that the design Mars is the only aspect of the core wound. We need the collective portion, which is given by Chiron, and we also need to consider the emotional repertoire, because when you actually resolve these 3 placements, you start to feel really, really good. And then you're ready to jump in and align with your ideal reality, your life path, why you're here, and then connect that with your soul mission, your larger plight through creation, and then actually use that to determine your purpose here on planet Earth, what you're here to build. Finally, the last phase, and this is the fun one, is natural prosperity. Everyone likes abundance. There's tons of these money mindset coaches out there, but you have your own relationship to your definition of abundance. And that's why I call it natural prosperity, because natural prosperity means you get what's natural to you. And this is what you attract. So this is like the law of attraction, but like the real version, not just like writing down affirmations, and actually discovering your hidden genius. So yeah, if you want to try this out and see what Trifecta is about, because I feel like this is like another facet of the experiment that's really cool, because my intention here is to help us circumvent the need for a dark age, circumvent the need for all of the potentially negative things that Ra Uru stated in his prophecy. And I think we can do that by aligning and working from a higher order. I think a lot of what he created in the mechanics of human design are excellent, and I have to give huge kudos to him. But I also want to explore and see if we can use some of that base layer that he created for other things, refining, repurposing with higher frequency information, working from higher orders. And that's why I'm currently very much in alignment and very much alive with the energy of cosmic human design, the true sidereal system, and of course, Trifecta. So if you want to try out Trifecta, I have a free 3-day journey where you can get your collective wound reading, and you also get personalized processes resolving it. I'm not here to give you a chart that tells you how to live your life. I'm here to identify things and help you identify things so that you can shift them, move through them, integrate them, and essentially live in alignment. So if you want that, there's a link in the description below. Yeah, so this video really kind of gives you the overview of how human design evolved and some of these modern iterations of what myself and several other people out there are exploring with the true sidereal system. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, and I will be back next time with more exciting stuff. I think I might actually switch it up a bit and start talking about some of the therapeutic uses of your chart, which is where you actually feel the shift. People say, how do I live my design? And they often hear, you follow your strategy and authority. And that kind of sounds parroted in a way. But I think we have many natural authorities and strategies that arise naturally within us when we're operating at a certain frequency. So I hope you enjoyed this. Take care. Feel free to leave a comment below. I will always reply. Bye-bye.